I was packing my son's lunch when the principal called. Don't send Jacob to school today. We found something in his locker. The police are involved. My hand froze mid-motion. Turkey sandwich forgotten. Jacob had left 20 minutes ago. I'd watched him walk out the door with his backpack, violin case, the same kid who organized his bookshelf by author and color-coded his homework planner. Mrs. Delacroix's voice was different now. Tight. Careful. Like she was reading from a script prepared by lawyers. What did you find? My voice came out steadier than I felt. I can't discuss specifics over the phone. Come to the school immediately. Bring legal representation if you have access to one. The line went dead. I called David. He worked downtown, 30 minutes away in good traffic. Then I grabbed my keys and drove to Jacob's school with my pulse hammering in my ears. 3 police cars sat in the parking lot, not cruisers idling nearby, actually parked officers inside the building. A security guard I'd never seen before checked my ID at the entrance and spoke into his radio before letting me through. Mrs. Delacroix met me in the hallway. Behind her, 2 plainclothes detectives stood outside her office. She looked older than she had 3 weeks ago at the fall concert, lines etched deeper around her mouth. Mrs. Reeves, thank you for coming so quickly. Her formality felt like a wall. These are Detectives Larson and Hayes. They need to speak with you about what we found in your son's locker this morning. Detective Larson gestured toward the office. David arrived as we entered, his tie loose, face flushed from running across the parking lot. We sat across from the detectives while Mrs. Delacroix closed the door and remained standing. Larson opened a laptop and turned it toward us. Security footage played on screen. Grainy, time-stamped 7:15 a.m. A figure in a dark hoodie approached a row of lockers, opened one, reached inside, closed it, walked away. The locker number was visible on the combination lock. 847. Jacob's locker. Do you recognize this person? Larson asked. The build looked right. The height looked right. But the face stayed hidden under the hood the entire time. Could be Jacob, I said. But could be anyone his size. Hayes pulled photos from a folder. The first showed the inside of a locker. Textbooks, notebooks, a red gym bag. The second showed the gym bag unzipped. Plastic bags filled the interior. Dozens of them. White powder, pills in various colors. We field-tested the substances. Fentanyl, methamphetamine, oxycodone. Street value approximately $15,000. Larson's tone stayed neutral. Clinical. Your son is currently at the station being questioned by youth services. The room tilted. David's hand found mine, both of us sweating. Jacob doesn't do drugs. My voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. He's never even been to detention. This is impossible. We received an anonymous tip at 7:45 this morning, Hayes said. Caller reported a student dealing drugs from locker 847. Gave us the red gym bag detail specifically. We searched the locker during second period and found everything exactly where the tip indicated. Mrs. Delacroix spoke from behind us. The school's zero-tolerance policy means Jacob is expelled effective immediately, regardless of criminal proceedings. I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. We drove separately to the police station. Jacob sat in an interview room with a woman who introduced herself as Diane Ostroff, youth advocate. His eyes were swollen, face blotchy. He stood when we entered. I didn't do it. Mom, I swear. I don't know how those drugs got there. Larson read the charges. Possession with intent to distribute. Juvenile court hearing in 5 days. Jacob would be released to our custody with an ankle monitor. If convicted, juvenile detention until 18. 4 years. I hired Lydia Kovach that afternoon, criminal defense attorney specializing in juveniles. She interviewed Jacob for 2 hours while David and I sat in the kitchen, unable to look at each other. When she emerged, her expression was unreadable. His story is consistent. Says he went to his locker before first period around 7:50, got his math book, went to class. Everything was normal, got pulled from second period English, had no idea why until they showed him the drugs. The footage shows someone at his locker at 7:15, I said. Jacob was home at 7:15. I made him breakfast, watched him eat, drove him to school at 7:30. The drive takes 12 minutes. Can you prove that? Lydia asked. I pulled out my phone. Jacob had texted me from the parking lot, heading in, with a timestamp of 7:44 a.m. Lydia made a note. This helps, but doesn't eliminate the possibility he arrived earlier for some reason. We need to prove someone else accessed his locker. Jacob said he'd never shared his combination. School-issued lock, combination mailed over summer. He'd written it in code inside his student planner. Add 3 to each digit. Smart, careful, typical Jacob. Someone set him up, Lydia said. We need to know who and why. Make a list. Everyone near his locker, everyone in his classes, anyone he's had problems with recently. The anonymous tip was too specific. Whoever called knew exactly what was in that locker. We made lists until 3 in the morning. Jacob's friends, Owen Novak, Alicia Green. Adjacent lockers, Megan Torres, Ryan Fletcher. Classmates, lab partners, lunch table kids. 43 names total. The next morning, I went to the school and asked to see the security footage myself. Mrs. Delacroix refused. Evidence in an active investigation. But she walked me to the hallway where Jacob's locker was located. Security cameras mounted at both ends covered the full corridor. Were any other lockers searched? I asked. Just 847. The tip was extremely specific. She frowned. Specific enough that whoever called either planted the drugs or watched someone else do it. I spent the afternoon calling parents. Most were sympathetic but knew nothing. Some were defensive, angry I'd suggest their children's involvement. One mother hung up on me mid-sentence. By evening, I'd spoken to 26 families and learned nothing. Lydia called the next morning. Her investigator had interviewed 12 students. No one saw anything unusual. No one knew about drug dealing. No one had conflicts with Jacob. We need to focus on the security footage, she said. I'm filing a motion for complete footage from all cameras between 6:30 and 9. If we can prove Jacob wasn't there at 7:15, their timeline collapses. I drove him at 7:30, I said again. We need proof. Phone location data, a witness, something objective. David called the cell phone company. Location data would take 3 to 5 business days unless we had a court order. Lydia said she'd get one, but it would take 48 hours minimum. The hearing was in 3 days. That evening, I drove back to the school and studied the building. The side entrance where I dropped Jacob had a camera above it, pointing down. If that camera caught him entering at 7:45, it would prove he couldn't have been at his locker at 7:15. I called Lydia immediately. She amended her motion to specifically request all entrance camera footage. The judge granted the motion the next morning. Lydia spent 6 hours reviewing footage in her office. She called at 8 p.m. The side entrance camera shows Jacob entering at 7:46. Exactly when you said. Relief flooded through me. So, the hallway footage was someone else. Same height and build, but not Jacob. I went through the hallway footage frame by frame. There's a moment when the person turns slightly. I can see part of their face. It's not Jacob. Who is it? I'm sending the enhanced image to a facial recognition consultant. But there's something else. Her voice changed. I found footage from the main entrance at 7:12. A student enters carrying a red gym bag identical to the one in Jacob's locker. The student goes directly to the 8th grade hallway. 3 minutes later, same student leaves without the bag. Who? Ryan Fletcher. His locker is directly next to Jacob's. I pulled up our list. Ryan Fletcher, 14 years old. Jacob barely knew him. Different classes, different friend groups. I tried to picture him. Had I ever even seen him? Maybe once or twice in passing when picking Jacob up from school. Just another 8th grader in the crowd. Why would Ryan frame Jacob? I asked. I looked into Ryan's record. He was suspended last year for fighting. His father is... She paused, and the silence stretched long enough that I knew what came next would be bad. His father is Detective Larson, the detective on Jacob's case. The floor dropped out from under me. I sat down hard on the kitchen chair, the phone pressed to my ear so tight it hurt. Larson's investigating his own son? Larson doesn't know yet. Neither does the school. I confirmed the relationship through public records. Ryan uses his mother's maiden name, Fletcher. She and Larson divorced 3 years ago. Messy divorce, according to court records. Custody battle went on for 8 months. So Larson's son plants drugs in my son's locker and Larson investigates? My voice rose. David appeared in the doorway, looking alarmed. That's not a conflict of interest? Massive conflict, Lydia said. Even if Larson genuinely doesn't know Ryan's involved, the moment his son attends the same school as the accused, he should have disclosed it and recused himself. I'm filing an emergency motion tonight. Judge will want to see this first thing tomorrow morning. We might be able to get the charges dismissed on procedural grounds alone, but the footage is even better. This is solid, Sarah. This is really solid. After I hung up, I told David everything. We sat at the kitchen table in the dark. Neither of us had turned on the lights, and tried to process what this meant. Our son's life hung in the balance because a detective didn't do basic due diligence, because he wanted a quick win, or because he was overworked, or because he simply didn't care enough to verify. We could have lost him, David said quietly, if you hadn't pushed for the footage. If Lydia hadn't thought to check the entrance cameras. If Jacob had gotten to school 5 minutes earlier that morning, but he didn't. I reached for his hand across the table. And we didn't lose him. We're going to win this. And then what? He goes back to school where everyone thinks he's a drug dealer? The kids, the parents, the teachers, they all know. Even if he's cleared, that stigma doesn't just go away. I hadn't let myself think that far ahead. One crisis at a time. But David was right. Even vindication wouldn't erase what had happened. People would remember. they'd whisper. Some would always wonder if the charges were dropped on a technicality rather than actual innocence. Upstairs, I could hear Jacob moving around in his room. The ankle monitor limited his movement, but at least he was home. At least he was here and not in some juvenile facility, surrounded by actual criminals, learning to survive in a system that had already failed him once. "We'll deal with it," I said finally. "Whatever comes next, we'll deal with it. Together." The emergency hearing happened the next morning at 9 a.m. We arrived at the courthouse 45 minutes early, Lydia already there reviewing her notes. Jacob wore khakis and a button-down shirt, court clothes we'd bought the day after his arrest because suddenly our lives required court clothes. The ankle monitor was visible beneath his pant leg. He kept tugging at it unconsciously. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, with fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. Judge Patricia Callahan presided. 60-something, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She had a reputation, Lydia had told us. Fair but exacting. She didn't tolerate sloppy police work or prosecutorial overreach. We needed her to live up to that reputation today. Detective Larson sat in the back of the courtroom with Detective Hayes. The prosecutor, Robert Yates, young and ambitious according to Lydia, sat at the state's table shuffling papers. Mrs. Delacroix was there too, in the front row, hands folded in her lap. She caught my eye and gave a small apologetic nod. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Callahan entered and took her seat. "We're here on an emergency motion filed by the defense in the matter of Jacob Reeves. Counselor Kovach, you have the floor." Lydia stood. She'd done this 100 times. She moved with confidence, spoke clearly, commanded the room. "Your Honor, I'm asking for immediate dismissal of all charges against my client based on newly discovered evidence that proves his innocence and reveals serious misconduct in the investigation." "Strong words," Judge Callahan said. "Show me what you have." Lydia connected her laptop to the courtroom's projection system. The large screen at the front of the room flickered to life. "Your Honor, the state's case rests on security footage showing someone at locker 847 at 7:15 a.m. That locker belongs to Jacob Reeves. The prosecution argues that footage shows Jacob planting the drugs found in his locker." She clicked a button. The grainy footage from the hallway played on screen, the hooded figure at Jacob's locker. However, the prosecution failed to verify this person's identity. They assumed it was Jacob based on body type alone. No facial recognition. No confirmation of arrival time. They never checked when Jacob actually entered the building. Another click. The side entrance footage appeared. Me dropping Jacob off. Jacob getting out of the car. The timestamp clear. 7:44 a.m. This footage shows Jacob Reeves entering the school at 7:44 a.m., 18 minutes after the drugs were planted. He could not have been the person in the hallway footage. Judge Callahan leaned forward, studying the screen. "Mr. Yates, did your office verify the defendant's arrival time before filing charges?" The prosecutor stood. He looked less confident now. "Your Honor, we relied on the police investigation. The body type matched. The locker belonged to the defendant. The evidence seemed conclusive." "Seemed conclusive," the judge repeated, "but you didn't verify. Continue, Counselor Kovach." "There's more, Your Honor." Lydia pulled up the main entrance footage. At 7:12 a.m., a different student enters the building carrying a red gym bag. The same red gym bag found in Jacob's locker containing $15,000 worth of drugs. The footage played. Ryan Fletcher pushing through the door, gym bag over his shoulder, walking purposefully toward the 8th grade wing. This student goes directly to locker 847. You can see him working the combination. She zoomed in. He opens the locker, removes items from the gym bag, places them inside, closes the locker, and leaves. The courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. 3 minutes later, the same student exits the building. No gym bag. Lydia let that hang in the air for a moment. Then, "Your Honor, this student is Ryan Fletcher. He has the locker directly adjacent to Jacob Reeves, and his father is Detective Michael Larson, the lead investigator on this case." Every head in the courtroom turned toward Larson. His face had gone pale, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Judge Callahan removed her glasses slowly. "Detective Larson, stand up." Larson stood. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Are you telling me your son attends the same school as the defendant in this case?" "Yes, Your Honor." His voice was barely audible. "And you didn't think to mention this? Didn't think it might be relevant?" "Ryan uses his mother's name. I didn't make the connection until when?" Silence. "Until this moment," Larson said finally. "I swear, Your Honor, I didn't know he was involved. I saw the evidence, the footage. It looked solid. It looked solid because you didn't look hard enough." Judge Callahan's voice could have cut glass. "You had a hooded figure on camera, and you assumed it was the defendant without checking his actual arrival time?" without reviewing footage from all entrances, without considering that someone else might have accessed his locker? The anonymous tip was very specific. The anonymous tip was called in by someone who knew exactly where to find the drugs because they planted them there. She looked at Lydia. Have you identified who made the call? Not yet, Your Honor, but the phone records are being subpoenaed. Given that Ryan Fletcher knew the location and contents of the drugs, he's the most logical suspect. Judge Callahan turned back to Larson. Detective, I'm trying to decide if you're incompetent or corrupt. Did you know your son was dealing drugs? No! Larson's composure cracked. I had no idea. We barely speak. His mother has full custody. I see him maybe 3 times a year. I didn't even know he'd transferred to Riverside Middle until... He stopped. Until when? Until I got the case file. I saw the school name and I thought about calling his mother to ask, but the evidence seemed so clear. I convinced myself it didn't matter because the defendant was obviously guilty. I thought... His voice dropped to a whisper. I thought I was doing my job. Your job is to find the truth, detective, not to close cases quickly. Judge Callahan looked at the prosecutor. Mr. Yates, why didn't your office catch this? We weren't aware of the family connection, Your Honor. That's your job, to verify, to investigate, to make sure innocent people aren't charged based on sloppy police work. She shuffled papers on her bench. I'm dismissing all charges against Jacob Reeves immediately and with prejudice. These charges cannot be refiled. The defendant's record will be expunged completely. The ankle monitor will be removed today. Relief hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. David's hand found mine, both of us shaking. Jacob's head dropped into his hands. Detective Larson, you're removed from this case and from any case involving Riverside Middle School. I'm notifying the police chief of these proceedings and recommending a formal investigation into your conduct. If it's determined you had any knowledge of your son's criminal activity and proceeded with this case anyway, I'll recommend charges for obstruction of justice. Your Honor, I swear I didn't know. Then you're incompetent. Either way, you're done here. Bailiff, escort Detective Larson out. Larson stood frozen for a moment, then turned and walked out. Hayes followed, looking shaken. The door closed behind them with a heavy click. Judge Callahan looked at Jacob. Young man, I'm sorry for what you've endured. This should never have happened. You're free to go. Outside the courthouse, a technician removed Jacob's ankle monitor with bolt cutters. The black plastic cuff fell away, leaving a red mark around his ankle. Jacob stared at the mark like he couldn't quite believe it was over. Lydia approached, briefcase in hand. Ryan Fletcher is being picked up by a different department as we speak. They'll question him with his mother present. Given the amount of drugs and the premeditation involved, they'll likely try him as an adult. What about the other kids? I asked. The ones he was selling to? That'll come out during his interrogation. If he's smart, he'll cooperate and give them names. Might help his sentencing. She looked at Jacob. You okay? He nodded, but didn't speak. Jacob, Lydia said gently, you're going to have some tough days ahead. People at school will know what happened. Some will believe you're innocent. Some won't. But you've got your record expunged. Legally, this never happened. You can hold your head up. What if they ask me about it? Jacob's voice was small. You tell them the truth. You were framed. The real dealer was caught. The charges were dismissed. And then you move on. She squeezed his shoulder. You're stronger than you think, kid. We stopped for lunch on the way home. A diner Jacob had always loved. The kind with vinyl booths and laminated menus and pie displayed in a glass case. We ordered burgers and milkshakes and pretended everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. How could it be? Jacob pushed fries around his plate, not eating. Do I have to go back to Riverside? David and I exchanged glances. We hadn't discussed this yet. We could look at other schools, I said carefully. Transfer you somewhere new. Fresh start. But that's like running away. Like I did something wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, David said firmly. Then I shouldn't have to leave. Jacob looked at us, and his eyes were older than they'd been a week ago. Ryan did this. Not me. I'm not the one who should leave. Appreciate you watching this far. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe so you won't miss the next story.